Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon, my beautiful girlies. It's Grace, and let's hop right in to this makeup get ready with me. So, for today's topic of discussion, what will people look back at us 50 years from now and be shocked by? So, this is a very interesting topic for sure. Definitely a recurring theme on this channel is that, the future and how much I don't really like to talk about the future, especially the more that I grow in my 20s, because the future is just so scary, especially these days with everything going on in the world. But, it's still, very fun just to kind of like see, basically, what, things could be, in the future, and how we would look back at our past, because we do that all the time, especially now with everything that's happened this past decade alone. So, I think that this is just such a nice topic to honestly think about, because the people of today, how would we look back at the people, from 1976, and, the things that was going on in that world 50 years ago, and I don't know, I think it'll just be such a great topic to think about. So the first thing that people would be shocked by when they look back at us 50 years from now is how we lived through a global pandemic that happened for the first time in 100 years. This point, I believe, definitely takes the cake. It's actually so crazy now that it has been 6 years since that said global pandemic even began. And it's just so crazy. I know in one of my previous videos, I talked about the global pandemic and what it had to do with our youth and stuff like that. But, just now looking back is just so crazy to me, because, you would never think that, what a global pandemic would have happened, especially just with the advancement of everything, like technology, transportation, and all that, goods and all that stuff in the past of 100 to 120 years. It's just insane. You would just never think that. The last global pandemic to have this much juice was basically the influenza pandemic of 1918. Literally at the end of World War I, which is just what? You just don't think that we would have another pandemic in another 100 years. It's just crazy. Guys, what? In another century from now, we would have another global pandemic. I don't know. I still don't believe that we lived through a global pandemic whatsoever. I am just still shocked. I'm pretty sure that majority of the world is still shocked that we really did shut down the world. I don't know. I think it would just be one of those things that people from the future would just be like, oh my goodness, our world really did go through a global pandemic. And nobody could have predicted that. Even though the global pandemic started at the end of 2019, literally in December, just seeing the buildup of that pandemic, the start of that pandemic from December of 2019 up until March of 2020, those past like 3 to 4 months really was the calm before the storm. It's just so crazy. Quite literally in March, the world turned upside down. And, from December of 2019 to February of 2020 is when, people started hearing about it, and people just weren't taking it seriously because, why would we at that time? Because we thought it was, like the flu. We thought it was like Ebola. That happened like 5 to 6 years prior in 2014 when I was a preteen. And you would just never think that something that big would happen at all. I don't know. It's just crazy to say the least. And the entire buildup of just like, what happened that March of 2020 to like May, and, that summer, which is like, the George Floyd protest, and, all of that, and just the fires that were happening. And gosh, it was just an insane summer. It was just super duper insane, to say the least. It's like, wow. Basically, what was our world, turning into at that point? Because it kind of just seems like, wow, like, the turbulence of events that were happening were just so insane. It's just so crazy to think that now that is like 6 years in the past now. And I don't know. The saying, real life at times is definitely much stranger than fiction, for sure. Because like, how do you just explain, not only the past previous years, but especially COVID? Like, no one saw that coming. That was definitely a, left field kind of move, for sure. I mean, just even my last moments in school, for normalcy at that point, and just seeing how schools are now, my goodness, it's really trippy, and it's actually really, really scary, because it's just like, wow, like, what? That actually happened? We were not in school for 2 months. They said that the 2 weeks to just 2 weeks to calm the storm, or 2 weeks something. Oh, you just gotta do it for 2 weeks. I don't even remember that line, because it was just so long ago, but it was very, very recent. Obviously, gosh, it's just crazy. And I know, like, people that will look back on this 50 years in the future would just be like, oh my goodness, like, not only did this impact, the US, but it also impacted the entire world. It changed our world in so many ways. And, unfortunately, people would like to say that, oh, like, COVID didn't really change anything, whoop. And it's like, I don't know if the people that say that are either A, living under a rock, or B, just don't want to acknowledge that not only have things have changed, after the pandemic, but we are actually still currently in the pandemic. We are still living in that pandemic world. We just don't really talk about it anymore. And I feel like the biggest reason why we just don't talk about it is because of that, trauma from that time. We like to say that people didn't die, or, well, no, not that people didn't die, that, everyone in the world didn't catch COVID, but there was over 1 million people that died globally due to COVID. And the fact that people to this day don't want to acknowledge that because, of trauma or because of just conspiracy theories and all of that silly stuff, it's just really, really sad, because it's just like, no, guys, like, everything did change that year, and it changed everything in the most drastic way possible, in ways that you would never think that it would change in. And I know definitely in the future, probably like in the next 5 to 10 years, once 2020 is scarily enough, probably like 10 to 15 years out from now, we're gonna talk about this. We're gonna talk about, how indeed COVID did change our world, and how, we were living through trauma, because, a lot of things were taken away at that point. And, hopefully in the future, we do not have another, pandemic. But, I don't know. It's just really, really scary to even think about that point, for real. COVID just really highlighted, humanity and Mother Nature in a lot of ways that, we probably just don't think about it now, because again, we're not really that much far out from the pandemic. It's still a very recent thing, since we're still in the 2020s decade, but it's just, I don't know, you've seen humanity do things in very horrific ways that you wouldn't expect humanity to do. We should have been united in this, but unfortunately we were divided. And hopefully for the future, we can be more united and being there more for our neighbors, and for people that are more susceptible, and for people that are more susceptible to getting these kinds of viruses. And hopefully at that point, 50 years in the future, we could do a much better job of just being there for each other. And yeah, y'all. But yeah, you guys, how we had a global pandemic for the first time in 100 years would be the first thing that people would be shocked by looking back 50 years from now. So the second thing that people would be shocked by looking back at us 50 years from now would be the amount of microplastics that are in our food. So, probably this point isn't as shocking, to a lot of people, since unfortunately the food quality definitely has changed, and we can see that especially like with my generation versus like, millennials or even Gen X, of just how, food quality in this country has significantly changed over the decades. And, with just like the rise of technology and just the different climate that we are in currently, because oh my goodness, the stats with the amount of microplastics in our food is just insane. I had the unfortunate displeasure to learning that fact. How there are like some things that you just wish you didn't learn. The microplastics one was one of those facts. And I definitely get it. We need to be very educated with what's happening around us, what's happening with us, and all of that stuff. But I don't know to what expense, because it's just like, you know, I could have gone, I could have gone all of my life without learning that fact at all. And the fact that I had to learn it through just like my curiosity, because they like to say that, curiosity does kill the cat. I learned that fact. But the amount of microplastics that we have in our food is just insane to think about, truly. It's just like these companies that just love to play in the same food, and not only food but even water that we eat and that we drink out of is just crazy. Because like, what do you mean that everything that we consume, not only our food, has microplastics in it? Like, where does that even come from? And how did those microplastics get in there? I don't know. I mean, you could actually like probably say that it doesn't even matter, what we consume, because it's not like, what we, eat or drink or whatever might, not or may have microplastics in it, because it's like, at this point I wouldn't be shocked by that. It's just really sad, because the food that is supposed to keep us healthy, the food that's supposed to nourish our bodies, is the same food that is potentially poisoning us. It's just crazy how everything that's supposed to be for our nourishment is just basically, poisoning us. It's just so great, because like, what in the world? Like, why would the people that are making these products would do this to us? I mean, we all know the answer to that one. But it's just really, really sad. I don't know. Now I kind of wish I didn't learn that fact, but we the people definitely just need to be more informed about that, because we're literally eating this. Like, this stuff is in our bodies. So I don't know. It's an unfortunate way of, knowing this fact. But, it is what it is, I guess. But, yeah. I don't know. Hopefully, now with the amount of microplastics that is in our, food, hopefully now there are like companies that are just working on, not, having that amount of microplastics in the things that we eat. And they have hopefully just done a much better job at like finding the problem and hopefully potentially solving that problem for, we the people. And it would be very, very, sad but not shocking if they didn't come up with anything. But I hope that they will, and I know that they will. And hopefully 50 years in the future, this won't have to be a problem for us anymore, especially just like with the rise of, technology, for example, like AI, the most common one. There must be some other forms of like solutions that can whatchamacallit, get us to have more, healthier options in our food where, we don't have dangerous, plastics or chemicals that, will kill us. So hopefully that can also exist in the future. But yeah, y'all, I don't know. Maybe in the future, microplastics won't be a problem anymore. A girl can dream, a girl could want best for, our citizens, and not only for our citizens, but for the entire world. But yeah, you guys, the amount of microplastics in our food would be the second thing that people would be shocked by, looking back at us 50 years from now. The third and last thing that people would be shocked by looking back at us 50 years would be how much AI is very prevalent. Especially within this decade, AI has definitely made a very big jump, whether from ChatGPT, whether from OpenAI, whether from Google Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, all the Copilots. AI has definitely made its presence. And well, actually, I was gonna say AI chat box. AI chat boxes. Okay, yeah, I can't say that word. Chat box. I said chat boxes. Okay, but yeah, AI has definitely made a very huge prevalence in our current world, and that's gonna keep rising, scarily enough. But I don't know. I mean, a lot of people are against AI, as they should be, because we don't want AI to completely take over our lives. But realistically, we use AI every single day. Not to be that person, but we do use AI every day when we don't even realize it, like our own GPSs, autocorrect, when it comes to just like regular word autocorrect. I don't know, there definitely should be regulations with AI for sure, and hopefully in the future we can have those regulations. But I don't know, it's gonna be very, very interesting just to see that. And I don't know, it's just going to be very interesting to see how the world reacts to that, and how we adapt to that, because we are definitely in a new era. We are in a new stage. So the things that used to exist, the things that used to work 10 to 15 years ago, and as I'm talking like the previous decade, just really won't work now, because we're just not in that world anymore. So it would just be very, very different. But yeah, I mean, just how AI is everywhere is just crazy, and it's honestly kind of scary, especially with the robots. I don't know, it's becoming more like iBot, or that robot movie with Will Smith that everybody on the internet keeps referencing. I don't know, it's definitely getting scary out here, but hopefully AI can be used for good instead of bad. I know that we tend to think that, when this happens, it can automatically be used for bad. And it definitely can be if we're not too careful. But I think and would hope that we can use AI to help humanity. We can use AI for the better. And it doesn't really have to be a bad thing at all. We just have to be, more careful with it. So, but yeah, hopefully, and this is so scary to think, basically half of a century from now. Gosh, I don't even know what AI would even be like in 50 years. That's actually really scary to think about. I don't know. For the other 2 points, it was really easy, but I guess for this point, since we're living through AI now, I don't know what AI is gonna be like in 50 years, but I just pray that it helps humanity. And that's all I'll say on that, because I don't know what else to say. But yeah, you guys, how AI is so prevalent would be the third and last thing that people would be shocked by looking back at us 50 years from now. All right, you guys, so we are finished with this makeup look. What do we think? Added a pop of yellow, to kind of complement the fit a little bit, and I think it does. It definitely highlights the blonde. But yeah, I hope that you guys enjoyed this topic of discussion. I hope that this topic got y'all thinking, just like it got me thinking. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope that you all enjoyed. I hope that y'all will have an amazing Monday, an amazing week, and I will see all of y'all's beautiful faces next time. Bye, guys.